Welcome to Whova's Event Insider panel discussion series. My name's Marisa, and I'm your host. Each Event Insider session invites experienced event professionals to cover a new event industry topic. The topic of today's discussion is the return to in-person events, with guest speakers Linda Jones, author of the Event Planning Toolkit and organizer of the Software Solutions Fall Conference, and Anne Swanson, the conference coordinator at the United States Swim School Association. If you're interested in viewing more content for event organizers, subscribe to our channel where you can see more interviews with top event professionals and new content on the latest event industry trends. Now let's get into the discussion. It is now time to introduce our guest panelists who are going to share some really useful tips and insights from their recent in-person events. So first, I am excited to welcome Anne Swanson, who is the Conference and Meeting Coordinator at the U.S. Swim School Association and the organizer of the SSSA National Conference. So Anne, I'm going to turn the mic to you if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thanks so much, Marisa. I really appreciate it. And thank you for having me here today. I'm excited to chat about getting back in person. I know it's definitely a crazy time. So thanks so much for having me. A little bit of background. I work for, as Marisa had mentioned, the United States Swim School Association. And we are a membership-based organization that helps to serve entrepreneurs who are in the Learn to Swim business. And recently in October, we went back in person for our national conference. And so I'm excited to talk about all of that today.
Thank you, Anne. We're so happy to have you here too. And I'm excited to hear everything you have to share. Our second speaker here today is Linda Jones, who is the author of the Event Planning Toolkit and the organizer of the Software Solutions Fall Conference. Linda?
Hi, Marissa. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate today. I love talking to other event organizers, so certainly a passion of mine. Been doing it for a long time. For Software Solutions, I've been organizing their customer conference for over 15 years now. And we are a technology company. We provide software to local governments. And so our customers know each other pretty well. They love to get together on an annual basis. And network with their peers, get face-to-face with our team, and learn more about the software that they use every day. So a very important mission that we try to fulfill with this conference, and we were very happy to be able to go back to in person this year. Can't wait to tell you more about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction, Linda. Thank you again both for being here. You guys both have such great experiences in running conferences, so I'm just really excited to hear all that you're going to share today, and I know that the participants are eager as well. So to get right into it, could you each tell us a little bit more about your experience in event organizing and then some more details about your most recent in-person event? And what was the biggest factor for you to decide to host this event in person?
Last year we did have a virtual event, and there were a lot of I'm in Ohio in the United States, so there were a lot of mandates in place at the time, which made having a live event impossible. This year, those mandates did not exist, and so there were no state, there were no city, there were no health department guidelines that prevented us from having a live event. And so, in talking with the venue, they were excited to have us back in person, and honestly had no, our contract was binding. That's the bottom line is our contract was binding. They were excited to serve our group. And so we made the decision, we talked to the people who were going to be presenting all the different tracks, all the different sessions, and we gauged their comfort level, made a few tweaks to make sure that they were as comfortable as they could possibly be in this environment, getting in face-to-face with a bunch of people again. And yeah, we made a few tweaks in order to be as safe as we possibly could and have the protocols in place to do it safely and successfully. So we did it. We did it. I mean, the venue was a huge help. They understood our hesitance and, some people's hesitance in getting in person again. They had a lot of protocols in place to make sure that they were totally masked at all times. They increased their cleaning protocols. They worked with us on modifying our food service to make it as safe as possible, and just lots of little details that equated to having a more safe environment.
Awesome.
That's great. So for our event, we, in terms of making the decision to go in person, we had been continuously reaching out to our members, doing surveys, trying to understand where everybody was in terms of their comfort level. And, I think those responses really helped to guide our decision ultimately. Very similar to Linda's experience as well. And I'm guessing most of you out there, we had contracts that had been in place that we previously were able to push off. Our event was taking place in Florida. So if you're not familiar, Florida in particular just there's not really a lot of, mandates there, and there haven't been for a while. So, that was, it to some degree made our job a little bit easier, I would say. But it was one of those things where we, I think, really just continuously felt the pulse of the membership, and then work to really give options for everybody. So, if you were comfortable coming in person, fantastic. If you weren't, we still had options for you. As I'm sure almost everyone on here, we had run our conferences virtually for 2020. So we had already had some experience with that. And so, we offered a hybrid to our attendees so that, our hope is that no matter where you were on, the comfort scale of things, that there was an option for you. And, that in part with, being obligated contractually, and having sort of, pushed that contract down the line, we really felt like it was, the right time for us to go ahead and meet. And for us, that was in the beginning of October. So, I feel like we did that successfully. But it was definitely a little unique in terms of the planning process for that.
I know that you both kind of touched on your venues, that you both had contracts previously, but the next question I wanted to ask about was about venue sourcing. So did you both already have that venue as part of the contract before? And was there anything else during that process of, scheduling your in-person event in terms of the venue? Anything that you think other organizers should keep an eye on when sourcing their venue for their first in-person event?
As I had mentioned, we did have a contract in place for that we, were obligated to fulfill, and we were happy to do so. The venue that we were at in Florida was very spacious, which made my job a lot easier. And being in Florida, the weather was on our side, and so we were able to, get creative, and particularly for meals that, normally we would have had inside, we always had outdoor seating available for everybody. And the hotel staff separately, they were masked the entire time. That was, the hotel's decision. And one of the things that we shifted, and maybe we'll even get into this a little bit more later, but was how we served food. Typically we do a lot of buffets, so we kept that, but we actually had them all served instead of, kind of a self-serve setup. And I think that worked really well. And it overall, I feel like the hotel that we were contracted with was really wonderful in understanding the scenario that we were in. And we kept them abreast of what was happening in terms of the surveys that we had been sending out to our membership. And I think that really helped give them a sense of what we were up against. And, and sharing that and that open communication, we kept them posted throughout that whole process. And so, when we knew we had to drop our food and beverage minimum, we knew we had to drop our room block, we were very communicative throughout that entire process, and let them know, hey, we're doing everything in our power, but here's where we're at. And just coincidentally, when we held our event in Florida, it was at the peak of the Delta variant in Florida. That certainly posed some extra challenges in terms of our registration numbers. I know we definitely heard from members who said, hey, I was planning on coming, and you know what? Given everything, we just, we need to back out. So, our numbers changed consistently throughout, sort of in accordance with what was happening with the world. So I think it was sort of helpful already having the contract in place, because that decision had been made, and it was one less thing, quite frankly, that we had to really work through. And we were lucky that the hotel was gracious enough to work with us and sort of renegotiate what we were obligated to fulfill throughout that event.
I think that most event organizers know, especially if you're planning an event with several hundred people, that you have to find your venue very, very early, and so going out and sourcing venues for right now, I'm putting out RFPs for our 2023 event. You have to start that early, especially if you're looking for a venue of a certain size, because all the best venues get taken up very quickly. So yeah, this venue was chosen before COVID was even a thing. And they were also willing to negotiate our minimums. Unfortunately, we didn't have to do that. I don't know, our timing was just pretty perfect for us in Ohio. We had our event in October. Our registration opened in June, and June is when everything was opening back up in Ohio. Everybody was back to work, and all restrictions were being relaxed, and registrations just started streaming in. And so all through June, July, and most in first part of August, we were seeing normal registrations. People were excited to come back to a live event. Really had very few inquiries about virtual option. And then things started to heat back up again in the August, September timeframe. And so we really started taking a look. But we only had 7 people that ended up canceling that had registered. We had 225 registrations. We ended up with 217 people that actually showed up. So our people were just ready, and we didn't have to work with the venue to reduce our minimums, because we actually exceeded. I had to find another sleeping rooms outside of the hotel for some of our folks, because our attendance was higher than what I anticipated.
So I did want to kind of talk about backup plans, like what was kind of your strategy or policy in place for attendees canceling? What did you kind of provide for them in the event that, uncertainties didn't allow for them to travel, or whatever the case may have been?
For me, it was you had to start looking at the budget immediately. It's like, if we're going to have, you've set your registration fee based on what you know about what your overhead's going to be, what your costs are going to be for food and beverage, audiovisual, speaker fees, on and on. So you set a registration rate based on how many people you think will attend, and based on your best guess based on past history. So we immediately started looking at the budget. What kind of things can we cut out? Can we cut out break food? Can we cut out some of the goodie bag items, or can we get them sponsored? What can we do with food service, that will, and something I learned, and I'm just, we're like you, we do the buffet route pretty much, because you can feed a whole lot of people very quickly and provide variety. But what I discovered, I never ever took much stock into the plated meals. They're cheaper. Plated meals they're cheaper.
They are
and
cheaper.
and you don't have the buffet lines, you don't have the bottlenecks, you don't have people handling the service utensils. And so we went to plated meals for dinner, and saved a ton of money doing it that way. You have to be very careful about making sure you understand everyone's food sensitivities, and your gluten-frees and your vegetarians and that kind of thing, making sure you're asking the right questions. But yeah, plated meals, I think I'm going to stick with them, at least for some things, because we saved a ton of money going to other kinds of food options, boxed meals for lunches. They could take them outside. We ended up having great weather, even though it was October in Ohio. That's always an iffy thing. But for lunches, people could spread out. They could go outside. They could take it back to their room. They could go in the lobby and not be, in that big banquet hall, crushed in. And so just provided a lot of flexibility. So yeah, that budget was the very first thing we had to look at and trying to find ways to cut back and still provide a quality event.
That's funny, Linda, that you mentioned that. That's one of those things I think that people are always surprised to hear, right? That you would expect the plated to be more money, and it frequently it's not. I will say, before I sort of get back to Marisa's question in terms of that, one of the reasons that we ended up doing a buffet, and we typically do, is because a lot of times we put our buffet in our exhibitor hall in an attempt to coax people into the hall, to make our sponsors and our exhibitors happy. That was one of our challenges, because I wanted to make sure that I wanted to please everybody, right? Which I know is an impossible feat. But I wanted to, I wanted our exhibitors to be happy. I wanted the sponsors to be happy, and I wanted the attendees to feel comfortable and safe. And so what we ended up doing was we still had a buffet lunch in the exhibit hall, and we had, we selected a menu that would work with this setup. And we had highboys sort of, throughout for folks to quite frankly, kind of stand and eat and have a more casual lunch. We also provided outdoor seating for people to, bring their meal to and to sit down. And I will say that I feel like that was used more frequently than I had anticipated. And that being said, our exhibitors were still happy, I think, because as people were waiting in line to get food, there were still, conversations happening and that kind of a thing. So it ended up being a bit of a win-win. But and another thing that we historically do is because we know we want to do buffets, we usually contract a discounted pricing for that up front. So we were lucky that we had that in place already for that particular setup. We do a more formal awards banquet where we do a plated dinner, and that looks a little bit different. And our exhibitors and sponsors typically aren't really part of that, so that one's a little bit easier from that standpoint. But going back to the original question, in terms of our backup, one of the things that we did is we're a very small association. There's 3 of us on staff. So when we're on site, there's 3 of us. We don't bring in anybody extra to help run. So and for this particular event, we ended up with about 160, 170 attendees and about 70 exhibitors. And what I had asked our presenters to do was to pre-record their presentation. And I had done this for our virtual conference in 2020. And I was very concerned about, quite honestly, with our budget and with our staffing limitations, that we could pull off a flawless live stream event. It made me very nervous. And so as kind of a little loophole to that, we asked most of our presenters to pre-tape their presentation. They turned that recording into me. I offered help if they needed it. Nobody did. I think at this point, everybody's pretty much got it down. And so they, ahead of time, they turned in their presentations to me recorded. And actually through Whova, we were able to upload those recordings to the app. And so we also had some virtual only attendees that had a discounted registration fee. So those folks were able to access the majority of our sessions, that were pre-recorded, really whenever they wanted. They were able to watch those. The beauty of that was, if we had a presenter who wasn't able to make it for any reason, we literally could play their video, and our in-person folks would still get that content. Shockingly, the presenters really were okay with it. I think they used it as an opportunity to to practice, to rehearse. And I think one of the hard things, I'm sure all presenters are certainly kind of tweaking things up to the last minute. And we sort of had to make peace with the fact that, listen, we understand that you may make some changes to the live presentation. That's okay. And we communicated that to them. And that worked out really well, actually. I think that was a win for everybody. And it was a really easy thing for us to manage. I did it ahead of time, so I didn't need to deal with it on site, which was great. And then we ended up, we had, our keynote speaker for the first day, we did live stream for our virtual audience, which I think we may be getting into a little bit later. We had some challenges. And so I'm happy to talk about what went down with that, and how we ultimately ended up with that.
Okay, well, great. So the next question I wanted to bring up is about kind of attendee estimation and sign up rate, dropout rate. You guys have both touched on this already. What would be your advice on kind of getting the most accurate estimation of attendees ahead of time?
I think if you've got an attendee list that you're working from, either from past events or from a client roster, membership roster, whatever it is, you've got to survey them. You've got to send something out and just ask a couple of questions, and say, here's a 2-minute survey with 2 questions on it. And it's to judge their comfort level, and just use that as a guidepost for what you think is going to happen. I mean, it's a swag. It just is, but just trying to communicate with them in advance and just take their temperature. And then past that, it's just using historical information, if you have it, on attendance. That worked for us really well. I mean, I think I said in 2019 we had 240 people at our conference, and in 2021 we had 217. So it really wasn't that far off from the highest attendance we'd had in the past, pre-COVID. So it was clear from talking to our clients and surveying them that they were ready. So that plus our binding contracts and our speakers' willingness, at which we also polled, and like I said, making a few tweaks with protocols at the event. We had willing speakers and excited participants. So that's what we did.
Do you think that I know that the number compared to your pre-COVID in-person event was pretty similar, but do you think that that discrepancy was because of slightly less registration, or were there more people you found dropping out after registering?
I only had 8 people that canceled after they registered. And I had a handful of inquiries where people were just uncomfortable or simply weren't permitted by their company to attend. They're working virtually, but yet you're going to send them to a live conference with 200 plus people that they don't know what they've been doing or where they've been. So some people just simply weren't permitted to attend. And then other people have pre-existing conditions that made them concerned, or concern for family members. And so there were things like that, I think, where people weren't going to attend regardless of what protocols were in place. It was just a no-go. So I think that's the discrepancy.
Makes sense.
We had a similar experience in that we didn't have a lot of folks drop out, right? Who had, originally registered and then decided to not come. We had about 3 to 5 folks who I would say fell into that category. Our numbers were definitely lower than what they normally are. We're normally at about 300, 350. And so we were quite a bit lower than we normally would be. It was not a surprise to us. Obviously, like I'd mentioned, we had done the surveys. One of the challenges that is unique to our group is that because our members are swim school owners, a lot of times they bring their staff to conference as well. And as you, I'm sure, are aware, there are staffing shortages. And so, they, on top of kind of struggling with just COVID in general, they had the unique situation of, can we even afford to take people out of the water to go to this conference? And do we have people, literally staff, who would bring it? So I think our numbers were affected for multiple reasons. I think it's amazing, Linda, that your group was pretty close to what it is. That's fantastic. Like I said, we did not have that. We felt lucky though that the hotel was definitely willing to work with us and continuing to lower those numbers and adjust them for what we what we saw coming. And I guess on the exhibitor sponsor side, we had a few, I think we had about 4 exhibitors who ultimately were not able to come in person. And what we ended up doing, it was great with Whova because we gave them a credit that will ultimately apply toward next year. And we allow them to stay on as a virtual exhibitor. And so that was a really great option for us. And they were able to still feel part of it and still able to connect to people, and get their name out there and brand awareness and all that great stuff, even if they weren't able to attend. And, we understand that it's not the same virtually. So that's why we offered the credit, and everybody seemed really, good with that. And so that worked out really well for our group.
That's fantastic. It sounds like you guys both did have great turnout, given the circumstances, first big in-person event. So that's amazing to hear that everyone was really excited to, get back in person, face to face. The next thing I want to cover is cost and budget. So how did you kind of see the cost changing with AV, catering, decoration, all of the standard in-person event costs, I guess, compared to your pre-COVID events?
I'll jump in on that one. Our I think I mentioned earlier that in our contract, we negotiate prices for a lot of our stuff up front. And so we were really lucky in that wasn't something that we were really dealing with for this particular event. That being said, we had extra expense for things like masks, and we bought a few, at-home COVID tests just in case. So we had some extra expenses in terms of, mitigating risk that normally we wouldn't have had. We pretty much run our own AV. So for us, that's an expense that's, kind of consistent. And so we didn't necessarily see that big increase. I will tell you, like Linda, I am sourcing right now for 23, and yikes, hotels are absolutely expecting to be booming. And it seems the pattern there for me at least seems to be they're not willing to commit to us yet based on our needs, or if they are definitely at a higher price point than they were previously. And so that's something we've been talking about internally, and to some degree, going back to what Linda had said about the budget and creating your registration fee. We've just at some point everybody's raising prices, and there's really no way for us to not. And so, ultimately our plan is going to be, raising dues, raising registration to help us, cover those additional expenses.
I'm very happy that I am in a 2-year contract with the venue that I used in 2021. So for 2022, I'm set on sleeping room rates and those kinds of things. So a multi-year contract can be a good thing in this particular time. One of the reasons we decided not to go with a hybrid event was because the in-house AV team that we were required to use at the hotel we were at, their prices were like nothing I've ever seen. And so even though we did have 3 presenters who presented virtually to the live audience, the additional AV we had to pay just for that, to be able to have our audience be able to see them on the screen and to be able to, get questions asked back and forth, those kinds of things. Even that additional budget item was surprising. So, and the way our event is set up, we've got 7 tracks going, 1-hour sessions, 2.5 days. And the thought of trying to come, to pay for the audio visual to broadcast live that many sessions and be able to turn it, every hour, 15-minute breaks in between was not something we could afford. We just couldn't. And people got used to, I think, during 2020 of being able to attend virtual events at no charge. So what will the market bear? As could you even cover your costs for audiovisual by trying to do a hybrid event? So I've kind of made the executive decision that it was all or nothing, baby. We're not going to do both. Just logistically and cost wise, we just couldn't swing it. because it's like hosting two events, right? Don't make the mistake of thinking that you're still hosting one event. You're hosting two events, and you have to have two different sets of people. But yeah, the audiovisual, make sure you understand the audiovisual costs of the venue that you choose or that you're looking at, and whether you have to use their in-house audiovisual or not, because especially if you're thinking of a hybrid event, that cost is absolutely huge, can be.
I totally agree with that. It's really, it originally, I'll be honest, my original stance was, we're not doing hybrid. We can't afford it. We can't run it with three of us. And we got some pushback on it. And then I buckled and said, all right, fine. Then we'll do pre-recorded sessions for all of our breakouts, and that worked great. But I couldn't ask that of a professional speaker. Obviously there would have been more cost tied to that. So for our members who are speaking, that's an easy ask. But when you're bringing people in and you're already paying them a lot of money to be there in person, to have them pre-record something was out of the question. And so we definitely had to kind of work around that a little bit. And Linda, I'm with you. It was a challenge. It definitely, the pre-recorded sessions were cake. That part I think was very easy. It was just managing, quite frankly, collecting those videos and getting those uploaded, and that was easy. But live streaming it's no joke, and the price tag on it is eye-opening.
Yeah, definitely a huge commitment to do that live broadcast. The next thing I want to talk about is health and safety policy measures. I know that both of you had very limited restrictions, but I guess I wanted to kind of touch on your experience with managing health concerns. Did you require any test results, masks? How did you kind of approach these COVID related health policies? So I guess just kind of share what your experiences with that and with your attendees.
We do not, we've not gotten into requiring vaccines, requiring test results. So we decided not to do it for our clients. We did provide everyone with a mask. We encourage mask using, and then of course all the protocols that the hotel had. They did not enter anyone's sleeping room while they were during their stay, so that they knew that their room would not be visited by anybody they didn't know, except upon request. Everyone at the hotel was wearing masks. Most of us, as far as the team is concerned, wore masks. And I know Anne and I were talking just before we started. We both did this, and I totally stole it from somebody else. So I'm sure people have heard of this, the sticker method that you put on your badge, where you indicate your level, your comfort level. So a green sticker means that you're good to go. Hugs and handshakes are okay. Yellow is I'm still being cautious. Prefer the elbow bumps or the fist bumps. And then red is I am not comfortable, would prefer to social distance. Those, I think, went a long way. It's like, we've got a sales team that is trying to connect with the customers. And so knowing how they could approach a client and what their comfort level was very important, so that they didn't do anything to make anybody feel uncomfortable. Just extending a hand for a handshake, some people aren't comfortable with it. So those stickers really helped us understand people's comfort level. And then, of course, spreading out as much as you possibly could. We took over the whole banquet or the whole conference area. We were only putting 6 chairs to a table instead of 8, trying to be socially distanced there as much as we could. Also in the breakout rooms, using the outside spaces. That's, the hand sanitizing. And then, of course, the food service, changing up the food service to eliminate people serving themselves at a buffet, and then using combination of box lunches, plated meals, and buffets that were served by hotel staff. So just a variety of things, everything we could possibly think of to make people walk in the door and feel comfortable being there.
Yeah, I love hearing that sticker method. I think that's a great idea that I'm sure a bunch of people are going to steal from this. So I love that.
As Linda had mentioned, we were chatting about it previously, and I have to say we also stole the idea as well. And what was unique, I guess, to our group is we were kind of laughing because I think there were really only 2 or 3 people who actually put them on their badges, which we were sort of surprised about. So our group didn't really use them. I think that honestly, I think that's unique to our group because everybody who I had heard doing that system previously really liked it. And so it's very low cost, right? We literally bought little, dotted stickers. And I will say one thing that we have a bling station where you can kind of dress up your badge. And that's where we had those laid out with some signage explaining, the system. We also announced that during our general session, and we had it posted on the Whova app. We had a whole, a COVID sheet with information. And so that was listed there as well. I really like Linda's approach, which essentially it was part of the registration experience, right? You pick up your badge and I think people would probably have been a little bit more open to actually utilizing it had we taken that route. So I think that's a really great tip. In terms of other mitigation efforts that we had going on, the hotel I thought did a really great job. Like I had said, all hotel employees were masked. They actually had one person who, God love this woman. Every single day, all she did was wipe down knobs, the handles of everything, any sort of high, touch point surface. And we were the only group in house, just coincidentally over that time. And so she was really, focused on our group. And so I greatly appreciated that. We had masks for everybody they were available at all times at our registration desk. There were, we had tons of them, more than we needed, truthfully, but that was okay. We also, as I mentioned, had done some of the at-home COVID tests. I know those aren't as reliable, but we just felt like just in case we may be in a situation where it would be great to have them. We did not need to use them, which was lovely. We did all of our meals outside. We had them, like I said, they were, served buffets instead of self-serve, which I thought was really helpful. All of our room sets were spaced out. That being said, I don't know that it made much of a difference. Our group is pretty tight knit. And so despite trying to keep them separated, they came together. So I feel like the hotel did a really great job, and I had communicated with them previously of what we were hoping we would see on site. And I think, we were lucky that quite frankly, that was already their plan and their system. And so that worked out really well. We had limited housekeeping. I think they were in, we were there for about a week. I think they were in for, maybe a day or two. They would go in, but you could also, let them know that you didn't want that service if you were uncomfortable with it. And so I feel like all of those things in play, I felt like really gave everybody, an option of, something, if they were comfortable enough to be in person, we were, still trying to put some things into place that made everybody feel good about it.
Just the communication that you can achieve through Whova in advance is huge. Setting the expectation for what to expect, when you walk in the door is crucial. I always try and, we brainstorm trying to answer in advance every question that could possibly come up and putting that into a communication or a couple of them in the days and weeks leading up to the event. Just letting them know, what to expect when they walk in the door and what protocols are in place, I think goes a long way to making people feel comfortable, when they arrive. So
I don't think I mentioned this. We had a sponsor who was willing to donate mini hand sanitizers, and they had their logo on it, but those were fantastic. I put them at every single table for every single meal. We had them. I had high boys in the, every breakout session, the general session. I put them on all of our crescent rounds for our sets. So that was no expense to us, and they were everywhere, which was great. And then it was great brand recognition for the company who donated them. So that worked out really well.
That's perfect. I love that. And Linda, you did kind of touch on the next question I was going to ask about communication. So, pre-event communication, did you have any increase in the amount of questions? What did those questions look like? How was the communication, I guess, different this year?
I'm not sure that we received any questions out of the ordinary. I think, like I said, I try to anticipate those questions and answer them before they can be asked. And that just comes from years of doing this and knowing, make sure you dress in layers because the rooms you can't control the temperature. You've got to make sure that you can take a jacket on or put it or take it off if the room isn't to your liking. And even though the Whova app has your total agenda, people are still the first day. What's first? Where do I need to go? What time is breakfast served? What time do I need to arrive? If they're arriving, if they're not arriving the night before. And so just anticipating all of that, exactly where do I go, and letting them know masks will be provided, and there are hand sanitizing stations everywhere, and meal dietary situations, contacting them about that. These are all standard event kinds of things, I think, but just putting the information out there and just reminding them of, hey, this is coming up. Here's what you got to think about when you're packing your bag or you're getting in the car, the timing of it, and what to expect when you arrive. So I didn't find it to be much different as far as questions being asked, because I think we put it out there before they could be asked.
We had a few small, handfuls of folks who reached out with very specific COVID related questions, but we also, leveraged the app in terms of communicating and sending out, updates and posting updates. And so I feel like with that tool, everybody was really on the same page. One of the things that I thought was really cool, typically we have a printed agenda, and then obviously, we have Whova. And this year I thought, do we really need a lot of printed agendas? So we printed off a very, non-glamorous version. And out of all of our attendees, we had one person make the request for it. So
that's interesting, because
thrilled with that.
We still give everybody a paper agenda, even though we have really high engagement rate on the app. It's still, I think, I thought that people would still look at that, and you may be onto something there. We might be able to save some trees.
It really, and we didn't offer, we had them. So we sort of pushed them a little bit to use it. And honestly, we've used Whova 2 years in a row. We used it for our, entire virtual event in 2020. And so I think our membership was somewhat accustomed to it, which was really great. But we laughed after the fact. I asked my registration coordinator, how many of those flew off the desk? And she said, you believe just one of them. So, honestly, it's not something we're going to put a lot of effort in. And it's just, obviously, with the app, it's just so easy to make changes and post announcements. So it's such an amazing tool. It really kind of revolutionizes the way I think that we work ahead of time and on site, which I really appreciate.
Well, that's amazing to hear that worked for you both. I'm looking at the time, and we're nearing 10 minutes till the hour. So I do actually want to move on and start with some of these Q&A from the participants. So just to get right into it, from Robbie, we have, what are those tweaks? Was there a price difference for attendees for the hybrid conference? Did your seating change? Did you see the amount of people at each round?
There was for our hybrid, it was a heavily discounted price break for virtual attendees. With that, we felt like we could offer a limited agenda for them. Like I said, we ended up live streaming, and we ran into a few issues with that for our general sessions. But we felt like, hey, we're offering you a heavily discounted rate. That means that you don't actually have access to everything. And we were very upfront about that in all of our marketing and the description of everything. And so to us, it made sense, right? That you pay less, you get less. In terms of seating, we spaced people out. We did a little bit different room set than we normally would do. We normally do kind of a pod setup. We did crescent rounds where we really, we were seating less people at each of the crescent rounds rounds than we normally would. Like I said, they just moved the chairs and sat together anyway. So I think that depends on your group and just knowing your group and what to expect on that.
Totally. I want to move on to the next question from David. Do the speakers or Whova or any of its customers have a sample waiver for attendees to sign? I'm not sure if either of you used waivers for this event, but as Luke mentioned in the response to this question, we do, Whova does offer a waiver form feature that you can directly use for your attendees at an in-person event. So in case anyone didn't get a chance to see that response, that is the answer. But did either of you by chance use a waiver for this event?
We made the decision not to use a waiver. We explored it a little bit, and then just based on the feedback we were receiving from our clients that were registered, that I don't know, we decided to forgo it. We just did.
Yeah, we didn't use one either. We put in our sort of COVID document that we had posted on Whova, and we had sent out in communications. We had a just a little saying that said by attending that you will not hold us responsible or liable. It was nothing they needed to sign. It was nothing that we collected. If memory serves, the Whova's waiver was not available when we were having our event. I think that's a newer upgrade, so that's pretty cool. We didn't really look into it just because, like I said, I don't think that was I think it was coming out right when we were meeting. So
I would definitely explore that next year if we're still dealing with this.
The next question from Katie is, we are hosting a conference next spring and hope to hold meals outdoors. However, hosting outside events brings the unknown of the weather. What backup ideas do you have for outdoor events that might be rained out and have to move inside? I know that it might not apply to you, Anne, in Florida.
Well, actually, it rains quite a bit in Florida.
Okay, that's true.
It's, certainly the weather we lucked out. I'll throw that out there. We were so lucky that it did not ever rain, really the whole time we were there, which I was surprised about. But we had considered it. And so I had worked with the hotel ahead of time to identify space that we would use indoors in case of, rain. That being said, I think, some hotels have tents and that kind of a thing. So I would say reach out to your venue directly and, work with them to find out you're not alone in that. And so I would see what they recommend in terms of a backup, because that's definitely, it's definitely something that can happen.
I agree. It's, between rain and wind and bugs and you just, with an outside event, it is a total you just have to be very happy with the plan B, whatever plan B is. So talking to your venue, understanding what they can accommodate quickly if you wake up or you check the radar and you've got a thunderstorm on its way, discussing with them in advance and keeping track of the weather and their ability to be able to shift quickly into an indoor mode. We had one day at lunchtime where it was beautiful and people were able to take advantage of the outside facilities. The next day, not so much. And we turned all of our breakout rooms into, we just opened them up for people to be able to use the breakout rooms in addition to the banquet room, where we were having most of our meals. Mm-hmm. So people could spread out. They also had a beautiful large lobby area with a lot of high top seating and things like that. People were typically to be used for, computer stations. And I saw people everywhere. I saw people everywhere on that second day. So they just spread out in what was available. So just, be aware of what's possible and talk to your venue.
Great. Thank you, guys. So just to keep moving on with these questions, Carla asked, did you have a worst case scenario to make your in-person meeting digital? Might be a quick answer.
We did. Our we had a kind of a drop dead date, right? Of we are going to make a decision by this date and come hell or high water, we're moving forward one way or another. And I think that was helpful instead of being in limbo the entire time. The other thing that we knew is with Whova, the turn for us to go from in-person to virtual with Whova for us was no big deal because, like I said, we had already gotten those pre-recorded sessions. So that quite frankly was already taken care of. And then we just had a few keynote sessions sprinkled throughout that, we would have had to deal with and probably had to do like a Zoom. But we had, one of the things that I had done is predetermined a time with those like live keynote speakers. I predetermined a time of, hey, will you still be able to present at this time if it ends up being virtual, right? Everybody's on different time zones and that kind of a thing. So, just kind of thinking through what will that look like if we do need to switch to virtual. But with Whova, honestly, it for us, that's seamless. It's really not, it's not hard to do.
If we had made the decision to go virtual, first of all, we would have lost a lot of money, but having used Hooven last year to do a completely virtual event, it would have been easy to transition and actually make sure the event occurred for our client's sake. Knowing that it wouldn't have been pretty from a financial standpoint. We had a kind of a 6-week out, go, no go decision date that we used, knowing that we would if we decided to not show up in person, we would be able to accomplish all of those recordings and getting them onto the website. And because we've done it all before, so it's pretty simple to connect Whova to a Zoom connection, the Zoom invitation. It's pretty easy.
I think that's a really great tip to kind of, set that hard date of we have to
Yeah,
pick one or the other by this time.
right.
And then our next question is, what were the modifications to food service? I know you both touched on this.
I would again, the only hiccup with that was moving from buffet to plated meals is that I didn't have enough information about people's dietary issues. Once they found out and I probably should have published our new menu ahead of time. It would have eliminated a lot of issues because I ended up getting things like, well, I don't eat red meat, so I can't have your sirloin or whatever. So if that was the only protein being offered, but again, the venue was very, very proactive. I used to tell them, I got people that don't eat red meat. They came up with a plate of chicken, so. But having to deal with that on the spot, I would like to avoid that in the future. So if you're going to go to a plated meal, just make sure you're asking the right questions about dietary restrictions.
The next question is from Joanne. Joanne says, hi, Anne. Were you penalized for reducing food and beverage in room block by your hotel? Any words of advice on how to negotiate with the venue?
We were not. And I think a lot of that had to do with, I'll be honest, I think luck. We were at a venue that's independently owned and that worked out to our advantage coincidentally. In terms of, pieces of advice, I would just really encourage you to stay in touch with the hotel and let them see the effort that you're putting in to get your attendees there. And I was honest with when I started hearing a little bit of chatter of for us, it was the Delta variant in Florida. And we had some folks say, geez, I can't imagine going there right now. I passed that information along to the hotel. I mean, there was nothing I could do about that. And I know they couldn't either, but I wanted them to understand our position. And I think that communication, I think it went a long way. They saw that we weren't just sort of throwing our arms up and saying, well, it'll be what it'll be. We really were putting solid effort into, making it work and trying to get folks there and making decisions that were going to make people feel more comfortable and communicating those efforts. So I guess I can't over communicate, the importance of communication, right?
Absolutely. The venue, they don't make money if you cancel. But they will make money if you show up with a smaller group of people versus what you originally. So an empty hotel or venue makes no money. So if they can see that you're working to get people there and make it happen, most of the time they will work with you to at least reduce. And we were prepared our venue was prepared to reduce our minimums if need be, because they could see that we were working very hard to ensure that that we could have a live event. So yeah, they're in it to make money.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you can also throw out to them, we didn't end up doing this, but when we thought it was going to potentially be really bad, we threw out to them, hey, we can rebook with you and we'll sign a contract for 2 years from now, or we'll, to try to, sort of sweeten the deal for them. So, that's a tip if they're kind of holding you to it, see what do you have to offer them in order to sort of lessen the blow.
I'm just gonna finish off with one last question that I think will be a quick answer from Debbie, wondering if you can share your cancellation policy. So for those few members that did end up dropping out, did you get full refunds, or did you have a fee for cancellation?
This is a standard for us, is 30-day out. You can cancel and receive a full refund. After that, the overhead costs are set. You're doing all of your ordering based on your head count. You're doing all of your sales orders to your venue with meal counts are based on your registrations at that time. So after 30 days, it's only unless it's an emergency, a death in the family or an illness that would prevent them from coming, would we provide a refund. So 30 days out.
Got it.
We try to encourage them to transfer their registration over to a virtual option and credited them back the difference. And we only had one person who did not want to do that. And in that case, we made the exception and provided a refund. We typically don't do refunds at all, but we tweaked it a little bit this year.
We are a minute past the hour officially, so unfortunately we do have to kind of wrap up today's session, but I just can't thank both of you enough for joining me today and just sharing all of this great information with all of the participants.
Thanks so much, Marisa.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Bye, everyone.
We hope you found this panel helpful. If you're interested in more videos like this one, be sure to subscribe to our channel, where you can explore the rest of the Event Insider series and more content for event planners. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.